Greetings and God bless. I wanted to do a video about this cliche, the map is not the territory, as it applies to many different things. So, for instance, I have chronic Lyme, and if you're in the invisible illness, chronic fatigue uh, world, you know that doctors are like, well, your blood work is fine. You have normal hormones, but conventional medicine, what it's trained in, isn't optimal health. It's just trained in pharmaceuticals, radiation, surgery. That's it. That's all they know, and that's all they want to know for the most part. And I'm not only speaking for myself, but from observing other people, not only in my family, but in on social media, just observing maybe hundreds, if not thousands, of people's experience. And for the most part, does seem that women past 30 start being gaslit and ignored by their doctors, nurses, just anybody. Um, so this isn't just me, being whiny, and it just seems like my personality is that I'm somebody who's just comfortable making an observation. I'm not, um, it seems like a lot of people just stay quiet, keep their head down, uh, try to avoid making anybody unhappy, and they just suffer silently, and that's just not my personality. So anyways, back to this map is not the territory. So I noticed this with labs when people are dealing with health issues, and I also noticed this with statistics about relocation. So there will be, like, some states will admit their statistics about DUIs, suicides, murders, uh, you know, um, whatever, diabetes, cancer. And something that I have realized over time is some states you won't find any statistics. Like Montana, the last time when I was there a few years ago, it was the number one um, statistically for suicide. And yet, if you look up Missoula, Montana, which is the number one spot for suicide, you won't find anything on the city website. And other weird things like Freemasons or human trafficking. Like, there will be absolutely nothing like for Montana. And Montana is a border state. Montana is also a long-standing Freemasonic location. Montana has a large Satanism population. Now, before you start saying, oh, there's no such thing as Satanism, try telling that to a Satanist. A Satanist says, I'm a Satanist. The Satanist says Satanism is real. So before an ignorant person starts questioning that, look it up. Satanists, they do exist, and they're very um, disciplined and established. And it seems like in the center of the nation, it really seems to be a strong place, or well, a strong group, and a dark group. They do create this oppressive energy and a lot of death and destruction. And people are like, I don't know why I'm so addicted. People are like, I don't know why there's so much suicide. I think there's a supernatural component. Yeah, there's weather issues or whatever, weird chemicals in the water and the air, but I do believe there's a supernatural component. So back to the map is not the territory. So some states will disclose their dirty laundry. They'll be like, yeah, we got all these murderers here. We have this high criminal rate here. And so people will be like, oh man, that's a bad city. And then they go to the state with absolutely zero. There's no documentation, or very, very low documentation. And what I'm realizing over time is that when there's very little information out there, about these bad things. I think it's either scrubbed, uh, or they're just not even disclosing it at all. So I lean towards trusting cities or states that will admit the dark, the high levels of homelessness or whatever, because they're honest about it. And when you are willing to name a situation, you're able to begin to address it. You're able to begin to navigate it. But when people are being gaslit, when there's all this denial, you can't even use a word, then you can't deal with it, because how can you address a problem if there's no specifics? So I just wanted to talk about that the map is not the territory. The facts are, the actual feet on the ground, tangible firsthand experience is really much more valid than statistics or graphics on the computer. Like, they can kind of give you a general idea, but it's not the whole picture. And like, I would say for South Dakota, everybody's like pushing South Dakota now. Everybody's saying how great it is, and they're forgetting. And of course, I think their people's intentions are good, or maybe they get some sort of uh, bribe or whatever incentive to push certain locations. Because I do notice across the board that the same kind of YouTubers or I don't know, like, and maybe it's just statistics, but uh, speaking for myself as a pedestrian, as somebody who relocated from a urban environment, like, there are more bars downtown than there are supermarkets, like an actual supermarket. Like, there used to be a supermarket downtown, but now it's just this empty building with lights on, like this huge, vast former grocery store. I think it was called Family Fair. So there's like a hardware store, but not a large grocery store. So you have to go like a couple miles either way to get to a larger grocery store. And yeah, there's the boutique health food store, but it's not comprehensive. Um, and like other things, like in San Francisco, or not South Dakota, a lot of the cafes close at 3 o'clock. The only one that remains open later is the one Starbucks, and because Starbucks is used to, later hours. But if you want a variety of other cafes downtown, expect them to close early, or the ones that do exist, that's not even quite downtown, they're closing at 3. So if you're going to meet a friend, you need to plan, like, oh well, let's meet at noon or 1, because they're going to close at 3. And also there's aggressive panhandlers. And I moved in a little bit I moved to South Dakota a little bit after the riots, because I was like, I don't want to deal with people pushing, like, the BLM thing, like white progressive liberals trying to guilt me about my skin color, as if I had something to do with history, um, and just casting aspersions on my uh, values. And then once the whole medical fascism started, I was like, okay, I'm going to go to South Dakota. But I got off the plane. I was taking a shuttle to the hospital. I had actually called not hospital. I was taking the shuttle to the hotel. I called the hotel to make sure the driver I was going to be riding with wasn't going to be, suffocating me. Of course, he was hysterical, and he was like upset that I was there. I mean, his job is to pick up people from the airport to the hotel, but he was like enraged. And even though I was 10 feet behind him in the van, he was like, you have to wear a mask even though the window could be open. It was a very bad beginning. And there's still plenty of people here who are virtue signaling. It's April 2022, and people are wearing their one or two masks. particularly if you're going into like federally funded things like a library. Um, when I had a bike injury, all the hospital wanted was me to, after they got my insurance information, they wanted me to suffocate myself. Um, they weren't concerned about my need for water. There was no water accessible in the checkout area, like check-in area. They didn't even have a working wheelchair because I had broke my foot. But they wanted me to suffocate myself. And even though it was illegal for them to keep harassing me, hassling me. So, anyways, also, like things like wind, like who, who would have thought wind would be an issue? But Rapid City can have like 60-mile-an-hour winds. And it seems like certain locations really get a large, like you get it really strong, and just a couple blocks later, it's not so bad. So I don't really understand what that's about, but the wind can be really bad here. And we're right next to Wyoming, and Wyoming is known for a lot of wind, and I forgot about that. But also, there's a lot of reservations, and the Native American reservations. And I guess a lot of people who are tourists, they have some sort of idealistic notion, and so they're, I guess they're just handing out, giving handouts to these drunk, um, drugged out, uh, aggressive panhandlers. And so, and like I have lived in poor neighborhoods all of my life, but here, the panhandlers aggressively, they corner you. So you're waiting to cross at a light, and then they come towards you. You exit a building, and once they see you, they come towards you. It is like a zombie apocalypse. The police do nothing. The locals don't do anything. The locals don't really um, register because they're all insulated in their distant homes, going to the malls. That's too hard for the people, the homeless people from the reservations to get to. Because what the homeless people at the reservations are doing is they're just hanging out where the tourists are. And I guess the tourists make it worth the aggressive panhandlers' time. And there's no police around. There's nobody around to uh, deal with it. And apparently, because of the whole uh, um, identity politics thing that's going on right now, nothing matters. And, um, me as a single female, kind of being cornered by a group of aggressive panhandlers, that's irrelevant. That's a non-issue. Um, So, yeah, and that's not in the statistics. South Dakota is just like, oh, well, you could buy a home for blah blah blah. But there's these other factors that I think are very significant. I would not want to bring my children. If I had children, I wouldn't bring them to downtown Rapid. And I see these kind of like innocent, naive parents, and yeah, and not to mention the aggressive driving. Now, I don't know if this is something that happened after the lockdowns, because when the lockdowns happened in spring of 2020, I noticed people were like, it was like they weren't even looking at the road. It was like they were thinking this was a video game or something. They weren't even realizing this is reality, and they could get hurt. So people were, and I was in Norfolk, Virginia at the time. And anyways, I just am noticing a lot of hostile, aggressive drivers. They seem to be upset that I'm waiting to cross the street, or that I have just crossed the street. Like people, and I noticed this when I was in Virginia and when I was in Montana, like drivers are so enraged that there's somebody walking. I don't know why. When I am walking, they have extra parking. When I am walking, there's extra space on the road for them. When I am walking, I'm not in the way when they're getting gas. So I do not know why they want to murder me. But I have had so many countless attempted murders on myself by drivers. when I am actually following the law, because I know these people are insane. I know these drivers don't care. I know the police doesn't care. I know that I have nothing to protect me. But I do need to get to the store. I do want to go to the library. I can't stay inside all the time because drivers are absolute unregulated maniacs and nobody cares. Um, and this is so there's this kind of insane driving mentality here, at least in Rapid, and so there's these YouTubers will do their relocation videos, and they're failing to take into account what I think is significant. I think it's very important to take into account the drivers. It's very important to take into account pedestrian fatalities or danger. Like when I was living in Missoula, Montana, the largest amount of phone calls that the police received was from drivers complaining about pedestrians in the downtown area. Now, in Missoula, the downtown area is where all the festivals happen, it's where all the restaurants are, it's where all the bars are, and yet the drivers are so entitled in Missoula, Montana. They're furious that like they want to go to the bars, they want to go to the restaurants, those drivers, but they don't want anybody else to be on the sidewalk. I mean, to be on the street, to be walking, at the light. It's I don't know what this insane driver's mentality is, and it's wild. It's nobody cares, nobody's doing anything about it. I mean, apparently in Montana, in Missoula, somebody killed two people on the sidewalk because they drove on the sidewalk and killed two young people, and nobody did anything. So anybody can do anything. It's anarchy, it seems like right now. So, with that in mind, don't be lured in by the grand generalizations. Oh, South Dakota is just a flyover state. Nothing's going on. No, look at the reservations, the Native American population, especially the damage done by the lockdowns, because that has exacerbated any weak aspects of any place that you're thinking about relocating. Take into account the weather. When there's 60-mile-an-hour winds and it's 0 degrees or 20 degrees, it's very difficult to maintain normal life because that's kind of dangerous driving weather. It's hard to even handle going outside. And so I think that is my point. Also, like for instance, I would also take into account if you are relocating, like the critical race theory, making white people feel guilty for their skin color, even though the whole area is white. I don't know if this is happening in Vermont or Idaho, but I know it's happening here in South Dakota. And like there's this what's called a land back movement. So when I first moved here, I was told by a Lakota that all the land as far as the eye could see, that all belongs to the Lakota. Even though, well, there's all these white people or black people or Latino or Asians, well, they're paying their mortgage and they're paying the property taxes, but apparently that does not belong to them, the people that bought that house and paying the mortgage and paying the property taxes and whatever. It actually belongs to the Lakota or Dakota or whatever that third one is. And then somebody pointed out to me that before the Lakota were here, there was another tribe that was in South Dakota, and they had just they had right before the Dakota, and the other one were here. This tribe had like a smallpox infection, and so the tribe was just killed off by the healthier Lakota that just came in. So it wasn't like the Dakota were here for thousands of years. They just killed off the previous people and were here like 20 years before the Americans did. So this whole notion of the noble, whatever, the noble victim, that's not necessarily the case. So, anyways, yeah, I think this is important to keep in mind. And, maybe the gangbangers in Michigan or whatever, maybe they're not really as bad because never when I was walking in, bad parts of New York City or bad parts of San Francisco or Oakland, never did anybody say, you owe me reparations. But about 2 or 3 times I was told that here in my first year of living in Rapid City, South Dakota. I was told that I owed them money to be walking on the sidewalk. So, yeah, it's been the worst relocation I've ever experienced in my life. And, all these um, naive YouTubers doing their relocation videos, I think it's really important that to take into account the Indian population, the Native American population, and how that is affecting things, the driving, the dangerous driving, pedestrian safety, and things like weather. Because nobody, when you're in Oregon or you're in New York City, you're not thinking of First Nations people. You're not thinking of 60-mile-an-hour winds. And the consequences of 60 mile an hour wind in 0-degree weather, how that can stop, things because nobody's shoveling the sidewalk or something like that. And those things are huge. They're tremendous obstacles. Like if you're afraid to go outside because of the aggressive panhandlers, that's what happened to me moving here to Rapid. And and I'm of course not covering all the other factors that might be specific, like if you're living in Hawaii or if you're living in Florida or something like that, like hurricanes and or Alabama tornadoes or Mississippi or something like that. Like, talking about scorpions in Arizona. Like I've known people who who've lived there and gotten stung, and it's been pretty terrible. And when you're living in New York City, you're not thinking of scorpions in Arizona, but those are kind of significant concerns. So, yeah, what do you think the relocation videos on YouTube or on the internet, what do you think they are missing that are significant that should be kind of addressed? So, um, put those in the comments below. So, thank you for watching and God bless.